this morning, as you all know, we have Capstone. The purpose of the Capstone is to give concrete skills after we've been taken in all this great science, then to have a session that gives us useful skills or resources and is as interactive as possible. For the new people coming in, there's handouts down here. There's 2 handouts. You should come get them. And so we're doing evaluation this morning, first of journals and then of data sets. So I am Carolyn Mills. I am a science librarian, but I'm also open access and author rights librarian at UConn. We have a number of different functional roles. I don't do all scholar communication. We also have someone who does the IRs, 2 people who do data, 1 person who, or 2 people, soon to be 1 person who does digital scholarship. So we kind of have lots of different ScholComm areas, but I do open access. And so I was involved in a agriculture research project a couple years ago where we went out and interviewed faculty, and one of the things when I asked about open access, one of the things I heard from faculty, and which I've heard from other faculty and grad students since then, is an area that they one of the things that keeps people from publishing in open access journals is not knowing what's a good journal and what's not, because so many of them are new, well, they're all new relatively, and there's not the reputation that traditional journals tend to have. You know, faculty know what the good journals are in their field. Well, they don't really know that for open access. And so that's the context in which I created this workshop. It's also a LibGuide. And so when I do the workshop, sometimes I do it focusing only on open access, and sometimes I do it generally when I do it for faculty, I do it for all journals, but include information about open access, because the same tools that you can use to evaluate an open access journal, you can use to evaluate any journal. There are some that are specific for open access, but the same principles apply. And so that's how this came about. I don't pretend to be the expert. There's a lot of people who know a lot more about this than I do. I created it because there was a need for it on my campus. And so you may have ideas of other great sources. If so, tell me about them. I'm happy to have conversation about stuff. During the actual presentation, there'll be some conversation parts, and I don't know, I mean, I can do some quick questions, but then at the end, if you have like ideas for things that I've missed or want to have discussion about particular sites, that would be awesome. So, because just 2 weeks ago, I was adding new information to this. There's always new stuff coming. Okay, so let's see. So this is also intended to be interactive, and so hopefully most or all of you have some way to get on the internet. You'll see I gave out 2 handouts. One is kind of my suggestions for how to use the tools I'm going to show you, and then the other is one side has a list of journals, which hopefully will add to the interactive component of this. Okay, so let's just proceed here. So one of the handouts on one side is learning objectives. Don't pay a lot of attention to that right now. You'll notice at the bottom of that handout there is a link to an evaluation, and when I do this workshop I ask people to fill out the evaluation. If you're only up to filling one evaluation out, do the science bootcamp one. That's the one that matters in this context. But if you're feeling really generous and you're willing to do a second evaluation, I'm happy to hear what you think about this at that link as well. And these are the parameters with which you should be determining how good the workshop is, because this is what I'm trying to do. Okay, so those who know me know that my husband has goats, so there had to be a goat in here somewhere. But I always like to start by talking about what is journal quality. So we talk about quality as if it's a known entity, and to some degree it is, but people have varying ideas about how you determine the quality of a journal. So I like to find out what makes a quality journal? This is the open answer part. Yeah. Yes, go ahead in the back.
Typically consider the publisher, the editor, the affiliation of the editor.
So where the editor's based. Okay, that's one very good thing. Everyone else? Yeah.
I was, oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Peer review.
Peer review, yeah, that's definitely another. Okay, what else?
Well, I think there's a component of, are the people in the field using that journal, because public behavior perception is also really important.
Yep, so what's the reputation of the journal?
Yeah.
What are the quality of the articles in the journal?
Right, so that could be looked at several ways. Does the content of the articles fit the purpose of the journal? If they don't, well, that's like a flashing light, and you'd think that would be like unheard of, but actually it's not for some journals. But then also the quality of the writing, the quality of the research. Someone in the back, yeah.
Respect that the academics have for the journal.
Right, so reputation, yep. Is it well thought of? Do people you know respect it and publish in it? Anything else? Okay, so then as we,
Okay, so nobody said,
Oh.
nobody said impact factors.
yeah, impact factor metrics, yeah, Val,
The databases in which it may be indexed in?
say it again.
The databases in which
Yes.
it may be indexed in?
That's one that people often forget. But, and non-librarians would never think of it, but that's actually a very interesting indicator. Where is the journal indexed? Is it in Scopus and Web of Science? Is it in Biosis? Is it in sociological abstracts? Is it being indexed in the indices that are important to that discipline? That's actually a very good indicator. And some of the sources I'll show you use that as their primary determination. So good. Any others before we move on to open access? Okay, so that's for all journals. Now, open access journals have their own attributes. So as you're looking at what makes an open access journal a quality journal, assuming that you believe that that you can have an open access quality journal, and there are people out there who do not believe that. But, so as you're looking at open access journals, what would you additionally look at for an open access journal? Or be particularly careful about?
Cost. Who pays for the publishing?
The cost of publishing, right, so the author APC, the author publishing charge. Although, that's always something to be considered, but there can be really awful journals that either the awful journals would tend to charge, but the really good journals will tend to charge too, so you can kind of get both ends of that. Yeah.
Whether they solicit authors or if it's the other way around.
Right, so a lot of us, probably most of us have heard from our faculty about all those emails they get from this journal and that journal that they've never heard of, inviting them to publish, inviting them to be editors, inviting them to review. Towards the end, we'll get to a list of questions, and that's actually one of the questions. Does this journal do blanket solicitations for people to participate? Yep.
How long has it been around?
How long has it been around? Yes.
Which is difficult because a good new journal could spring up and it doesn't have time.
Right, so that's actually an important point because a new journal, so one of the things, a lot of the things that we look at to determine the quality of a journal, a new journal may not have gotten to. So if you have a title and you don't know the age of it, and you look at a lot of the parameters we're going to look at, and you don't see that journal there, or you don't see those specific things yet, you may think, oh, this is an awful journal, where in fact it's just new, it isn't in the indices yet, it isn't in, there's a difference between, so we all have heard about predatory open access journals, that's like a well-known thing, it's almost too well-known among our faculty. And where was I going with that? I hate it when I have senior moments. Anyway, so remind me what you said again?
I was talking about how long they've been.
Okay, all right, so that's just completely gone out of my head.
Well, I can give an example.
Okay.
Dartmouth, along with 4 other institutions, started a journal called, it was under BMC, it was under one of the big publishers of the journal, the Anthropocene.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very well curated. I mean, it was a top-notch journal, but of course it's not going to be indexed
Because it's new.
for a while. And so how did they get their initial articles? they the editors talked to people.
They knew people, yeah.
Who were senior people to, who didn't care about, who already were tenured.
Right.
To kind of see that, and so, yeah, they were soliciting articles.
Right.
So I mean.
But it's not, so that kind of solicitation is different from like sending it to everybody,
Yes,
saying, we want you to participate in this journal in which you have no background whatsoever, or your research only tangentially, but new journals will do that, yeah.
I think it's a red flag in the other direction when a journal you've never heard of writes to you asking you to be a peer reviewer in an area that you're only marginally equipped to do
Yes,
so.
definitely.
I just opened my email and I got a letter from one of my faculty members at the top of my list, and he says, he got this, and he says, I would first like to congratulate you for getting your article, gives the title, published in Drug Safety Case Reports. Most importantly, I would like to let you know that our panel at ICCREEE, the International Consortium for Clinical Research Excellence, Education, and Ethics, is impressed with your article, and it says this is why, and this is what we would like to do, and so on and so forth. And he wants to know, are they legit?
Well, hopefully after this talk, you'll be able to tell. Yes, Bob?
I'm always suspicious of journals that promise a 24-hour turnaround
Yes.
time.
Yeah, or even a couple weeks, you have to be really, really on the ball to get it around that fast. And there are journals whose whole purpose is to turn quick communication to get it, but there's such a thing as too fast, because you need a certain amount of time for quality. There was someone else?
I was just reminding you, I think you were going to say something about predatory journals and how the faculty, and you lost your trail. You had said something about how faculty seem to rely on that list or whatever too much.
Oh, so has everyone heard of Beale's list of predatory journals? Well, that's actually off the market now, but it really made a lot of impact with not just librarians, but with faculty who have heard about it too. And that, in many ways, that's how at least some of my faculty view open access journals. So we have some work ahead of us. All right. So I have a LibGuide. This is available to anyone. The link is here. Woohoo! It's on the Boot Camp LibGuide. Everything I'm going to tell you about today is on this guide, and I have this CC BY and I think non-commercial. So anyone who wants to use this information is welcome to do so. I mean, you attribute it, but the whole purpose of this is to educate librarians, educate faculty, educate grad students. So the way it's set up is I have a series of different bars on the side with different kinds of tools, some for everything, some that are just specifically for open access. And the very bottom link is my suggestions, having looked at these tools, my suggestions for a triage of how to approach evaluating a journal, because nobody wants to go through all these sites, and you shouldn't have to. But different people look for different things, different journals have different emphases, and so the handout that you have, the second handout, is an abbreviated version of that last link. And so all the things that I thought would be particularly helpful in this setting are there, but there's more information at the site itself. And I'll continue to update this, and et cetera, but so there's that. And if you can link to this site on your laptops now, as we go through the list, it will be easy for you to connect to different sites. So the link is guides.lib.uconn.edu/journal-eval, and I think it's also on your handout. If I was smart, I'd also put it on your handout, but I can't remember.
You did.
I did, oh excellent, okay, so it's there also. So if you have that link to your internet connected device, then you can, as we're going through this list, you can just look at that and use it to connect. Okay, and actually before we get to that, a couple things I wanted to mention. So when I'm talking about quality, I'm not talking about subject suitability. A lot of times faculty and grad students, that's what they think of. Is this the right journal for my research? And I don't even attempt to address that because that's going to be very individual. So when I'm talking about quality, I'm talking about trustworthiness, I'm talking about reputation, I'm talking about the quality of editing, the reputation of the publisher, the willingness of those behind the journal to be upboard, ethical, and trustworthy. That's what I'm getting at for quality. And that has the same standards across the board. Okay, so the two handouts that you have, one of them, the one with the list of, on one side is a list of journals. There's an A journal list and a B journal list. So take a moment and pick a journal out of each, just mark it. There's all different subjects, and for the A list, we're going to, for this first section, you're going to take that journal and you're going to search in all the different sites that we go to and see if your journal comes up. So you can have your own example of something that's maybe not near and dear to your heart, but at least has some maybe subject relevance to you or to someone that you're working with. Okay, so everyone got a couple journals picked, one from A, one from B? Yes? Okay, all right, next slide. So now this is the beginning of my suggestions for how to rank different sources. So this is my gold list. These are sources that, if your journal is listed on one of these sources, it's a really good indicator that you have a quality journal there. And we'll walk through each of them briefly, but just being on one of these sites is a good indicator. Now, journals can say, we're a member of COPE, or we're a gold seal for DOAJ. Just because they say it doesn't mean they're there. I would always go and check, just to be sure. Because, anyone can say anything. Talk is cheap, but action is what matters. Okay, so the first three sites are standards sites. Like any industry, publishing has standards. COPE was mentioned yesterday, I think, in the material science introduction. It is an absolutely awesome site. But all of these are, the first three are all standards for journals in general. The second one is for open access journals. The third one is for medical journals. And then the last one, DOAJ, I think most of us know about the Directory of Open Access Journals, but within that they have a gold seal. It's being listed in the directory is nice, but it's not that big a deal. But their gold seal is a big deal. So let's look at the sites individually. Okay, so COPE. COPE is the Committee on Publication Ethics. It is an international site, freely available to anyone. It's intended for editors, for journal editors. Anyone who's a member of COPE is expected to follow their code of conduct, which is extensive, and it's really the model upon which all the others, anyone who has a publishing ethics, they base it on the COPE code. They have actually all kinds of things for editors. They have a whole series of problem solving. So like if you're an editor and you're having difficulty with something, you can come to COPE and they'll have case studies that talk about the difficulty a journal had and then how it was resolved. They have workflows that, so you're trying to work on your workflow for X. They'll give you existing workflows for ways that you can handle different problems. It really is an excellent site. But among other things, they have a list of journals, or a list of members. Their core practices is what I was talking about, and then they have webinars, etc. It's really good. And then if you go to membership, okay, and view journal and associate members. You can look by publisher also, but I find it useful to look by journal because since this is an editor's site, you want the commitment from the editor, not from the publisher. You can search, let's see, what am I going to search? I'll go for, since we did ecology, I'll go for the journal ecology. It's nice and easy. You can put the name of your journal in there and then do a search. Sorry, we should subset for journals because they have a lot of different ways to do it. looking now. Hiring not going. CV. All right, hold on. Sorry. Is anyone else coming up with yours, or is everyone?
It's just slow.
Slow.
Because we're all doing it.
Okay, so what it will come up with is just essentially your journal. And you're not gonna get a whole lot of information from the site, it's just that that journal exists on this site. That in itself is a really good sign.
What
So,
kind of order is it in?
what's that?
The listing?
You can say order by, you can see she's got order by relevancy.
Oh.
By relevancy, you can do it by date, by title, yeah, you can do it.
Okay.
My mouse is being weird, but you can do it in all different ways. Okay, so it's just, yeah, it's just running slow. Okay, so bouncing back over here to the PowerPoint. Okay, so that's COPE. The second one is OASPA, the Open Access Scholarly Publishers Association. This is a publisher listing as opposed to a journal listing. Again, it's freely available, it's international, and they include both trade journals, books, and scholarly journals, so it's not just scholarly. They also have rigorous membership criteria, so I'm going to go to OASPA. Okay. They also have a code of conduct, and it's similar to the one at COPE. It generally overlaps, although they have things particular for open access journals. They have a series of webinars for editors, publishers that are really quite good. And if you go to their membership link and scroll down to members, now they have kind of a weird listing. So they list by size of publisher, which is a really weird way to do it. So the way I search for it is Alt-F. At least on PCs, do you all know Alt-F? Will bring up a search function, and then you can put the name of your journal there, and you'll find it, the name of your publisher. So those of you who have journal titles, to use this site, you'll want to know who the publisher is. So I can give you a minute to search for your journal and to determine who the publisher is. And in fact, COPE would tell you that. And then look your publisher up on here. Oops. Okay, so I searched for PLOS, and here they are. And again, you're not going to get a whole lot of information at the site. Just the fact that the publisher is there is a good sign. Okay, you'll see, things about their policies, etc. Okay. All right. Again, back over to the link here. ICMJE is the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors. So this is a specialist site, and it's actually not the only one for medicine. There's another one as well, but I didn't want to include two. Let's go there. These folks make what are called recommendations. Instead of having a code of conduct, they have recommendations for conduct, but it's essentially the same thing, and you can go to their recommendation site and see the different sections that they have. And then you can go to their members sections of journals. They have two sections. It's the top one that you want. So journals that state that they follow the ICMJE. Now, they don't go and check each one out, and I don't know that COPE or OASPA does either. But journals that say that they follow these policies, and when they first apply for membership, they're checked. So they may lapse later on, but when they initially start, they do in fact follow the policies. And So again, it's an alphabetical listing. You can do Alt F and search for your journal. And it would then be a medical journal, because this is a medical site. So some of you may not have a journal that you can search here, but we can search for that. And here's PLOS Medicine, so I was searching for PLOS, and it pulls up, it actually takes you to the journal page itself. So again, just being there is indicative of some quality. Okay, so those are the standards. Pretty simple, but very useful. The fourth one is the Directory of Open Access Journals with their gold seal. And so we can go to the DOAJ site. So this is a listing of most open access journals. To actually get into the directory itself, there is a bar of quality that has to be passed, but it's not super high. It's just basic practices. But then within the DOAJ, they have a much more stringent level, which is their gold seal. To search DOAJ, if you haven't done it before, if you just put a word in their search box, it'll search for both journal titles and full text. And so I always turn off the full text articles because it's just too much. And so we can do a quick search in DOAJ. And then within that search, so if your word is unusual, like PLOS is an unusual word, so it only pulls up 8. There are 8 PLOS journals. But if I was searching a more common word, it'd pull up a ton of possibilities. And so on the left, there are ways to narrow down your search. So if I didn't do it before, I could do it here, narrowing just to journals as opposed to both journals and articles. I can search by subject if I want to, but it's this DOAJ seal that I would search for at this point. And so I can say, yes, I want them, the ones that say yes, and I don't want the ones that say no. And then my list will only include those that have that seal. And so you'll see on the listing here on each entry, there's a checkbox. The green check just means that they are members, which is fine. But it's this gold circle underneath, which means that they have that gold seal. And what that means is they don't use the code of conduct, but they have 7 publishing standards that the journal has to comply with. I'm not going to read them all, but some of them are that they have to have generous reuse and mixing of content using CC, some kind of CC license, Creative Commons. They have to have DOIs as permanent indicators, identifiers. They have to have machine-readable licensing. The author has to be able to hold copyright without restrictions, things like that. So again, having a journal that has that gold seal, you're not going to actually learn that much about the journal, but you will know that they have abided by those standards. All right, so those are the gold. It's a gold, silver, bronze, really trite, but gets the point across. All right, so now we go to silver star sources. These are very useful, but they're also more varied in what you can find. They're more informational, but they don't have quite the cachet that the first ones do. All right, so the first, let's see, the top one is a directory that's actually fairly new. It's not that new, but it's new to me. I just recently heard about it. Journal Guide, I think it's been around since 2013. This is a directory of journal profile pages. They collect information about journals. It's from Research Square, so let's go to that. Okay, so here's the site for Journal Guide. You can search a bunch of different ways. They set you up on this paper match, so what you're supposed to be able to do is put in the title and it will try to find journals, but I've tried that several times and I wasn't really impressed with the results for that, so that's not how I would use this. The way I would use it would be to search for a journal name. You can also search for publisher or by category, but to me the journal names are particularly useful. So let's do that. So go ahead and put your A journal name in there. So it will give you, if you have a simple name, like, so I put in the journal Ecology, because we had our ecology session on Wednesday, and it's also a great journal. And it pulls up any journal that has that word or that phrase in it. So there's actually a lot of journals with the word ecology. But it's okay because ecology is at the top. So I can then go and get information about, so they actually do have some interesting information, but the piece that's really useful here, I mean, there's several useful pieces of information, but what I really want to highlight is the top right where it says verified journal. The verification, so they're trying to list many journals in this, but not all journals are verified. What the verified means from them is that they've looked to see where the journal's indexed. So we were talking about indexing earlier. They look to see if there's good quality indexes that include this journal, and that's their sorting mechanism. So is the journal in a broad source like Scopus or Web of Science? Is it in the appropriate disciplinary indexes? And if so, then it gets a verified. They have other cool things there. Not all the information is useful. Like so for ecology is a society title that's been around for a long time. They have slow publication speed, and so that might be a turnoff for some, but it's such a well-known and established journal, and a society journal is generally going to have slower turnaround just because they don't have the money and the staff that a commercial publisher will have. So that's not necessarily a bad thing, although if you want to get your stuff out there quick and you don't care about being in a society journal, then it won't matter. They also have a few other things there, which is useful, but it's the verified that we care about. So did everyone get a chance to look for your journal there? Yeah.
How long has this been in existence, this journalguide.com?
I saw an article about it, introducing it in 2013. So that's about how long it's been around, but they've been adding to it over time. I think this is it's a collection that they're building.
I wonder how accurate it is, because my journal showed up in DOAJ and some of the other databases that we did before that said it was open access, and in this guidance it is not open access.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So they may not be accurate for everything. Yeah. Or they may have collected it in 2013 and although you would think they'd go in the other direction, from non-open access to open access and not the other direction. Some places will list hybrid journals as open access, but DOAJ, I don't think they do that. I'm actually not positive. I haven't answered that question. So that might also be an explanation. If in one location it says it's open access, it might be because it's hybrid, but then in another source they don't include hybrid. So if I cared about that journal, I would definitely check it out to see what the story was. Okay. All right, bouncing back here again. Journal citation reports. So I think a lot of us know this site. So this is a site that is a pay site. Everything up until now has been freely accessible. Not every library has the funds to access JCR. It's a product of, used to be Thomson Reuters ISI, and now their new name is Clarivate Analytics. So it sounds to me like an allergy medicine, but anyway, so we at UConn are fortunate enough to subscribe to it, and if you have access to it, it is a great metrics site. Now there's always a debate about metrics sites. Should we give them too much credence? And very, very good things to consider. Metrics are an indicator, but they're not the end of the story. I would just use them as one of many indicators. But on JCR, they use, hold on, I got to sign into the UConn Access. So most of you probably won't be able to follow me to this site unless you also can get to it at your own institution. But you can use this site to search for information on the journal itself, and you can also look at it within the ranking of its disciplinary fellows. So this is based on Web of Science. There is another site we're going to look at shortly called Cymagio, which is based on Scopus. Actually, several sites are based on Scopus. And both of those big citation journals have subdivisions by category, by subject. And they do it, each of them do it a little differently. So I can take my journal and look for it here just as a single journal, and again it will pull up all the journal names that have that word in it. And then I can go to ecology and it will show me lots of different statistical information over lots of time for that particular journal. We don't necessarily care about all these, but I will point out a couple. I think we all know impact factor, right? So that's based on a 2-year publication record and citation record for the journal, the previous 2 years. And a lot of people use impact factors. You can also get without an impact factor without self-cites. So if an author or journal cites itself, some people consider that to be not useful, and so you can get an impact factor that drops the self-citing out. You can also get a 5-year impact factor, so over 5 years instead of 2, which gives it more stability. You can get an immediacy index. So immediacy index tells you how quickly information is cited, how quickly it's taken up and used from that journal. So the immediacy of that information. Then there's also cited half-life and citing half-life. The half-life refers to the length of time over which information from that journal is either citing or cited. So citing means it's this journal, ecology, how long it's citing information from other journals. So how old, over what length of time is it still being cited? And the half-life is the half of that period of time. So if it has a cited half-life of 10 years, then that means it's being cited over at least a 20-year period. So that means the journal has a lot of longevity, the information has a lot of longevity. And then the cited means others are citing the information from this journal. It's just the flip side. And there's lots of other stuff that we won't get into, but and then I can also go back and look for the journal by category. So I can, so these are Web of Science categories, and I can go to, in this case it would be, I think, ecology. Sorry. I guess I don't have to find that particular one, but did I?
Here it is.
Oh, there it is, ecology. Okay, so then I can search for that.
All the way at the bottom, submit.
And it will, what's that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it will tell me about that journal compared to all the other journals in the field, and you can search it by different rankings. And so it's an interesting way of looking at the journal statistically by metrics compared to other journals that are also included in that database. So always remember that it's just what's in the database, it's not necessarily everything. Okay, so that's JCR. Cymagio, how many people have heard of Cymagio? How many people pronounce it Cymagio? How do you pronounce it? Cymago. Okay, so I don't know if anyone's ever determined what the correct pronunciation is, but everyone pronounces it differently. So this is a really cool site. It's actually been around for quite a while. A lot of people don't know about it. It's based on Scopus data, and it comes from the University of Granada in Spain. It's also freely available, which is really nice. And you can actually do lots of things here, but I'm just going to show you a couple. So again, I can go and search, and you can actually search by countries as well, which is kind of interesting. But let's just go by journal. They have a ranking here called the SJR, the Cymagio Journal Ranking. And so it's considered similar to an impact factor, but they take it a step further. So they're not just looking at the publications versus the citing, but they also look at what is the journal that cites that journal, and they look at, so there's a prestige factor, and some journals are more prestigious than others, and as they have an algorithm where they determine the number by the prestige as well as the actual impact. So this number in the corner here, this is an H-index. I think most people know what that is, but just in case there's some that don't, H-index looks at in this case for the journal, the number of publications in the journal on one axis, and the number of citations per publication on the other journal. And where they meet is the H-index. So in this case, the journal Ecology has had at least 241 journals that have each been cited at least 241 times. So you'll probably never see an individual with that. For human individuals, it'll be more like 10 or 5 or 30 or something in that range. And it's really just a snapshot. And it's the longer you've been publishing, the higher your number gets. So it's really kind of an age ranking and experience ranking. But it's another way that people can look at individuals and journals, etc. And then it gives you lots of information. The SJR is here for the journal. They give you cited and citable, collaboration, etc. And then they also give you quartile information. So this is by the squares there. That's by ranking within the journals in that discipline in Scimaggio, which are in the top quartile, second quartile, third quartile, fourth. And so ecology has been routinely for years in the top quartile of publications in that category. So that's another good indication. But again, it has to be covered in the journals, in the database Scopus for this to be useful. Okay. All right, probably should move a little faster. So back here, I do want to show you CWTS. This is another one that I found recently, because this looks at statistics a slightly different way. So CWTS is from the Center for Science and Technology Studies at Leiden University in the Netherlands. And it's also freely available, international in coverage, and they use something called a SNP, Source Normalized Impact per Paper. There's actually several indicators that use that. The journal guide that I showed you before uses SNPs also. So what a SNP means is, instead of just looking at an impact factor, because citation rates vary widely from discipline to discipline. So for instance, mathematics has really low citation rates. It's just normal for that field, versus molecular biology, which has really high citation rates. So in the normal course of ranking by statistics, you really can't compare. You really, because what's a good citation rate in one discipline is a terrible one in another. So what the SNP does is they look at the numbers of citations in different disciplines, and then they normalize them over all of them. So when you look at a number, at a SNP for a journal in one field, it should be normalized to be representative for journals in all different fields. So that's particularly useful if you're comparing cross-disciplinary. And so within this, again, they go by category, and so these are the Scopus categories. So for biology, ecology, it would be agriculture and biological, but you can search whichever one you're interested in. And then there's subsets within that category. And so for me, it would be ecology, evolution, etc. And so I can look for this. And I find this source particularly useful to look at collections of journals, not necessarily an individual title. You want to see how a journal stacks up among its peers. And so now we have here a listing of journals. Oh, and I should also say you can sort by different parameters. So I have it sorting on SNPs, but there's also a P. P means the number of publications, and the stability interval I'll talk about in a minute. Okay, so here we have ecology journals, the top however many there are, and ecology doesn't show up until number 27. So it's actually not the highest for SNP. It's not the highest impact in the field. And you can see that's the little red dot is the SNP indicator. But then we've got the bar. What the bar means, that's the stability indicator. So it means how stable that number has been over a length of time. Some numbers jump around a lot, like the top one here, which is Annual Review of Entomology. It's got a great SNP, but it moves back and forth a lot. That's not as stable as some. Whereas if you scroll down and look at ecology, it's not as high, but it's incredibly stable. And so it's been there for a while. And the quality has been stable over time.
Could you explain stability a little bit more?
Stability. So, impact changes by the number, by publication rates, right? So your impact, your SNP can go up and down, depending on just how many citations you've had in a given year. Some journals are quite variable, others are very stable over time. The wide bar shows a lack of stability, the narrow shows strong stability. So it's just another indicator that you can use to look at. And then it's also interesting to look at the number of publications. So either a journal that has a lot of publications either has a lot of publications in each issue, or it's been around a long time. But that would also tend to show stability. Not necessarily quality, but stability. Okay. I'm going to scoot quickly through the rest because I don't want to take too much time. Ulrich's, does everyone know Ulrich's? This is kind of, I always introduce it as the Bible, the librarian's Bible of journals. It has everything. Actually, it doesn't have everything, but it has most journals that are out there that are actively published. And it's not free. Institution has to subscribe to it, but most institutions do. It doesn't cost very much. It is a great place to look for basic information. Being listed in Ulrich's is in and of itself not a big deal, but you can determine a couple interesting things from Ulrich's, which is why I have it up here. It's just running slow. So let me put, so again, this is one that unless you have access to, you won't be able to search, but you can watch me. So I'm going to go to the online version of Ecology. Here's my title. And so then I have a listing, and this is probably familiar to most people. The things I would point you to are the abstracting and indexing. So before Journal Guide was out, before I knew about Journal Guide, this was where I would always go to determine abstracting and indexing. Where is the journal indexed? Some are indexed really widely, obviously this one is, and some less so. I still would tend to trust this. I still would tend to check this, even though Journal Guide's there as well. This has kind of always been my go-to, so I would still come and check this. And before I actually ever put this whole thing together, I would always come here when I would get faculty saying, is this journal any good? This is one of the places I would always check to see if it's where it's indexed. And then the other piece, let me just close this. The other piece that's particularly useful is, they don't have it, but many journals will have, at the very bottom, they'll have a review. They don't have it for all journals, but when there's a review there, it's from independent sources. It's not from the publisher, so it's from Librarians or from some other place, like, the ones that give reviews. I can't think of the name, but yeah, there's lots of places that we know about that I can't think of at the moment that do reviews. Choice, yeah. I don't know if Choice ever put stuff on here, but some reviewers do cooperate with Ulrich's, and so you can see the reviews there. And because they're independent, they'll give you a thumbs up, thumbs down that's fairly trustworthy. Okay.
I think it's from magazines for libraries.
That would make sense, yeah. Okay, I'm not going to go to...
back here.
What's that?
It's just me.
It's just you?
I was showing this database to a class of faculty, and so one faculty said, how come my journal's not in this database? And I go, good question, why don't you contact them? Within a few hours, she made contact with the database producer, and within a few weeks, her journal was listed in the database. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I've also noticed they often will have incorrect information, and I'll look up a title and it will not have abstracting and indexing or something else for that title, but then, I'll go to another format, so I usually go to the online first, but then I'll go to the print and it'll be there. It's the same journal, but they don't always populate each format with all the information.
And I've sent in corrections, and they're pretty,
Yeah.
I mean, with where I got my information from, and they have it corrected within,
Good.
a week. Their
Glad to hear.
turnaround is pretty fast.
Okay, so they're not necessarily perfect, but they are good at correcting. That's good to know. All right, I'm not gonna go to DOAJ, we've already been there, I think we mostly know about it, but it's just another good basic source of information about a journal, and if they're not in DOAJ, that tells you something. It's either new, or there's a reason they're not in DOAJ if it's an open access journal, so. Okay, so that's the first part. The second part is questions. So one of your handouts has, actually it's the same handout you've probably been following, but it has a list of questions on the other side. So now this actually comes from, I didn't make these questions up, although I tweaked them and actually came up with a couple, but these come from two sources, and I have them listed on the sheet. One was Grand Valley, and I can't remember the other one, but, so these aren't mine, but I always attribute where it comes from. The questions are things, are kind of either green flags or red flags. So there's positive questions about a journal. What are things that would indicate quality about that journal? They have so for instance, they have a really good about section, or they have, their editors are all listed with their, it's not just a name, but it's a name and an institution and a country, and if possible, a link, or email link or something. So, because one thing that we've heard predatory places do is they'll list a name, and the person may not even know that they're listed as an editor. And since there's no way to tell where they're from or to contact them, it's a relatively, until someone tells that individual they're on there. Okay, so now the list of journals, you go to the B section, right? So you're already working with A list journals, now go to your B list journal. And the list of questions, so we have positive questions here, and they're also on your sheet, so you don't have to squint and read them up here. These will be answered mostly either from the journal website, the publisher website, or Ulrich's. And don't try to answer them all, and I don't think anyone will probably answer them all, but you'll come up with your favorite indicators out of this list. Which are the ones that really work for you? At least some of these questions should be answered. So I'm also going to skip ahead and show you the negative questions. So these are the red flag questions. Things like, is there a publisher? You would be surprised that sometimes you'll have a journal name and no publisher listed. And eventually you can figure out who the sponsoring agency is, but it's not necessarily a publisher. Or do the articles that are listed, do they match the content of the journal, et cetera, et cetera. So for your B journal, take a few minutes now and play with this. Look at, pick a few questions and try to answer them. And then we'll talk about what you found. So we'll take maybe 5 minutes and just play with it. And if anyone doesn't have a computer and you want to come up here and play, go right ahead.
So, Carolyn, did you put any ringers in here that don't exist?
There are readers. I'll tell you after we're done where the two lists come from. But yes, so you will have some journals on the list that are definitely problematic, because I want you to have that experience. So if you have one question that you can't answer, go on to another question. Don't knock your head against the wall endlessly, but use this as an example of the kinds of things that you or your faculty will experience.
Even a gender to this journal, sorry. It uses the double-blind peer review process for all articles she reviews. Journal is a woman. He has a male editor though, so how did they determine so far? Maybe they're so there's probably something like that. It was not yeah.
I helped him out for him, but I also.
That's a good question, like what country is the power usually, like, or like maybe there's.
I just looked it up.
this is dynamic systems.
But anyway, who's the first one?
Yeah, right, and so like this is dynamic. Yeah, this is leading me to just sort of swing my videos like questions.
But the university did but they bothered to actually ready some stuff. Like,
As you're looking for information, if you're doing a search, perpetually soft-spoken. As you're looking, so if you do any searching for information, like for instance, if you're looking for a conflict of interest policy, it can be called different things like competing interest or there's different ways that can be expressed. So as we know as librarians, as we know to come up with different ways to express something, if you're trying to do a Google search with your journal for conflict of interest, think of the other things that can be called also. Like revenue sources can be called business models, it can be called support. Okay, so I've been told we are stopping at 10:15, so that's about 12 more minutes. I want to give lots of time for discussion about how this worked. So, what happened when you tried looking for these journals? How did it go?
Finding them was okay.
Finding them's okay, and then what?
And then like, there was only a link to the chief editor, and then the board of editors is only the first initial and last name, USA.
Yeah. Right.
There's an editorial one person.
Yeah, editorial team, one person.
Right.
And multiple personalities. And one of the things the Journal of Media and Communication Studies, the Pirates Journal of Media and Communication Studies, particularly looks for in exception papers is contribution to the fields of agriculture.
So the list, the first A list of journals came from the DOAJ Gold Seal. Those were all journals that had Gold Seal. If you searched on them, you would have found them there. So they should all be pretty good quality journals. This list came from Beale's predatory list. Now I want to point out, a journal that doesn't have these things may not be predatory. Predatory is a malicious intent to gather money and to not give quality. Journals can be cannot have this information for a variety of reasons. It could be inexperience, could be incompetence, could be malice. Just because a journal doesn't have this doesn't mean it's predatory. But if they don't have a lot of these qualities, for whatever reason, it's probably not a place that your faculty want to be publishing. So, okay. So, any thoughts about? Yeah, go ahead.
It's also, so like I looked at the Asian Journal of Chemistry and they had full CVs for the editorial board with contact information. Their scope, the English isn't great, but I mean, so I think they're getting sneakier.
Or
It's a predatory.
it's
Journal Guide, they have that verified status.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe that, or they just looked sketchy and.
so that was actually one of the problems with Beale's list, is that not everything on there is really predatory. It could be any number of, it could be language translation difficulty, could be a lot of reasons why a journal is lacking, and that was a lot of the controversy over his list. So it could be a great journal, just not good English. But again, you got to consider that when you think of it as a place to publish. Is that going to be a good source? Yes.
The publisher's email ends with @yahoo.com.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah.
And a
couple of times it's been a question of if they're publishing in English, if they're trying to review papers in English, I want their website to be really displaying fluency in
Yeah.
English.
Yep.
I went to the Pyrex journals, and their website at first glance actually looks pretty good. But the communications, the one that you had listed, it's published 2 weeks after submission. All areas of the journal that are not that aren't covered by other other Pyrex journals are published in the community. There were red flags there,
Yeah.
but the site, it's like it has a very professional looking
Yeah.
site. It also has only one person on the editorial board. But
Right.
going through that list, it was. But first glance, they actually you'd say, oh, this looks like a credible site.
Okay, so what you, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I looked at Dynamic Systems ampersand applications, which has the website of dynamicpublishers.com, and yet the journal Dynamic Systems and Applications has dynamicpublishers.org. And honestly, both of them are pretty terrible. So like the ampersand journal literally opens to just a page with like a heading of contents and a thing of lists of links.
Yeah.
But Dynamic Systems and Applications hasn't apparently actually published anything, and its website has the picture of a cover from 2002, and it misspelled its own title.
Okay. So you can see there's a wide variety of potential red flags out there. Okay, really quick.
I'm not today, but once before, I looked up the actual address that they gave, and then I went to Google Earth, and it was a motorhome.
It was what?
It was not a motorhome, but one of
Ah,
those.
interesting.
Trailer.
Okay, so this is information that you can do for faculty, and or you can show them, they may not, get all this stuff, and they may not want to take the trouble, and I certainly wouldn't expect anyone to use all of these things. That's a lot to go through, but as you use them, you'll kind of get your favorites, and you'll have your diagnostic questions that are particularly useful. Any one of these I would not use necessarily as a no way, but it's evidence over time, it's evidence over accumulated, yeah.
I also did the Pyrex one, and I didn't quite hear, someone in this vicinity also did. What made you suspicious about them?
They had that for the journal that was listed, the communications and media, that they said that articles were published within 2 weeks of submission.
Yeah.
Which is a really fast turnaround. They had one editor listed, and they had, they also said that for content, there were all areas covered, all areas that weren't covered by other Pyrex journals. So they had it wasn't about communications and media, it was just all areas not covered by our other journals.
So you would reject that as an open
I would
access?
see that as, I would see that as a red flag for
Because the journal
quality.
is listed on pyrexjournal.org as one of theirs. So I took that to mean that they were legitimately within the realm of Pyrex journals.
Yeah.
And the editor, while listed as one person, does exist at the university that says. So it could be one of those situations where their name was blocked.
So you would want to check further on that, check other
Could you just
attributes.
directly email the editor and be like,
Sure.
"Hey,
You
tell
can.
me more information about this journal?
Sure,
Or-
you can, and I would also look at back issues, and I would just, check more widely all the different aspects that you can find about that journal, and then make your decision.
I mean, just like
There's
the
no
people
Bible
at
here that
mass
tells you what's what.
communication catch-all journals sounds more like reasonable to me than like a chemistry catch-all, but yeah.
They didn't even mention communications and media. It was
They
like-
mentioned agriculture.
They said all areas of the
They
journal
run the
that
gamut, they run the journals go from ag to medical to, they're
yeah, so
incredible.
anything that's not in that, but communications and media.
Okay, so I have 5 minutes left, and I have to show you one more thing. Did you have something really fast?
Real fast. So an item of concern is, I just threw the name, the Pyrex title into Google, and what came up first is scholarly citation, Google Scholar citations for articles from that publisher. And we've just talked about how sketchy the publisher is, and people are citing
Yeah.
these articles. So it matters, and I've already put down an idea for a brief session to teach students about this.
Yeah.
You know,
Good.
one of the open house
And
events.
I would also like to look at how to, if there's a way to look at retraction watch and put that in here, although high retractions can actually mean a really good journal, so you'd have to be careful how you interpret it. All right, so I wanted to show you a couple other things specific to open access. Spark has a really good site called How Open Is It? Let me download it and make it big. So this is a chart that shows you the breadth of potential openness. From the bottom to the bottom is closed traditional access, the top is as open as it can get, and then you have categories about reader rights, reuse rights, copyright, etc. Each one of these will show you the most stringent and the most open, so you can see what the variety, what the different scope is. And you don't have to take a picture, you can get to this and it's on your handout as well. But totally up to you. So you can look at any journal and gauge it for how open it is. And then in addition, there is also a place, the Spark Open Access Spectrum tool. So this is where they, actually it may not be Spark, I can't remember who does this, but so they've taken that chart and tried to apply it to different journals. Now, they have a very limited list of journals. I think there's only 1,000 on here across many disciplines. So this isn't actually a place that you would necessarily go and find your journal. But what they do have is, I think it's under data. No, it's under FAQ. They have a system where they actually rank the importance of different factors. So you can take this information and rank an open access journal in the same way and determine which qualities are really important to you or to your faculty about openness. And as you think about open access, I encourage you, so we don't necessarily as individual librarians publish open access, although hopefully we walk the walk as well as talk the talk. But there are different components to open access to consider, both for you as an individual, for your faculty as individuals, to talk about with grad students. So the far left column is for readers. So this is for the users of literature. What are the most important qualities? And you can see it's one of the most highly ranked. Both readers and I think it's reuse rights are the most important ones considered out there. Being able to publish in an open access setting impacts potentially your copyright as an author. And if you have faculty who are thinking about publishing open access, it's been documented that citation rates go up in open access publications because they're more readily available. And if you are publishing in an open access source where you keep your own copyright, that's a really big thing. You know, as we all know, in traditional journals, most of the time you hand over your copyright and you lose the ability to use that information in the future. We know that, but faculty often, they're so used to it, they don't even think about it. And then when they want to reuse a graph or they want to use something that's outside of a fair use setting, or even if they even know what fair use is, it's really frustrating. Or they just say, oh, forget copyright, I'll do it anyway. It's being able to explain to people what the different levels of Creative Commons are, for being able to license your own work, to different levels of openness. It gets into open education resources. It impacts many different areas. And so this How Open Is It chart is a really useful one for you to understand conceptually, and also for you to introduce to faculty and students that are interested in open access, because this talks about it to a degree that most people, when they think about open access, they just think, oh, so I can just get to it readily. And that's, you know, that's open, but it's just the tip of the iceberg. Okay. All right, so I think, is that it? I think that's it. Yes, so that's it. So thank you. That was fun. And I think we have break now, right?
Planning committee members, if I can grab you before you go off to break for just a couple of minutes, come on down. If anybody did not get their ducky last night at dinner, we brought the box. And the boot vases were waiting on my porch, so 8-year folks come and grab one of those.